Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you if you are new to this study. I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be looking at the book of Hosea, chapters 4 and 5. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Hosea 4, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I do pray that your day has been going well. Pray that your week's been going well so far. Happy Wednesday. Good to be with you here again as we continue our journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. And we are now into the book of Hosea. And tonight we will be looking at chapter 4 and probably chapter 5. We're going to see how things go here tonight, and then we'll make a call later on. But we are in this third series of messages of judgment and restoration that we've seen so far in the first three chapters of Hosea. And the remaining messages that Hosea records in this, what we call a book of Hosea, is really going to expound on the themes that are introduced in the first two of these series of messages of judgment and restoration. That's what we've seen so far in chapters 1, 2, and 3. And all of those focus on Israel's guilt and the coming judgment, but also conclude on a positive note, promising some type of future restoration for the people. And at this point now in the dialogue, we are going to leave the account of Hosea's marriage to Gomer, and we're going to focus on a new section in the book, which is going to extend to the end of the book, chapter 14. And we're going to see these oracles of doom and hope, judgment, restoration, all throughout this book. So chapter 4, that we're going to look at for sure here tonight, and like I say, possibly chapter 5, but chapter 4 is really going to expose the sins of Israel in even greater detail than what we've seen so far. The northern kingdom, remember at this point, there are two kingdoms, northern kingdom Israel, southern kingdom Judah. And so we talked about, this is before Daniel. We are not in chronological order. The way the books of the Bible are presented are not in exact chronological order. So we are going back a couple hundred years here. And the northern kingdom Israel, they had broken the covenant that God had established with them. The priests of Israel, the religious leaders, they were especially guilty. But it was really all. It was these idolatrous citizens that all deserved this divine judgment. And they are going to receive it. So God is going to bring in a sense, a legal charge against the Israelites, the northern kingdom, for breaking this covenant that he established through Moses. And the literary form here is really like a legal confrontation. God is going to present his charges against Israel in verses 1 through 3, and then he's going to develop those charges in reverse order. So let's get right into it here. Open up your Bibles to Hosea chapter 4, and if you don't have a Bible with you, not a problem. As always, all the verses are up here on the screen for you, so you can follow along, take some good notes, a lot to look at tonight. Not long chapters, but there's so much in here. And again, this is a charge, like a legal charge from God against the northern kingdom, Israel. Verse 1. Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has a charge to bring. Remember, this is like legalese being presented here in the text. The Lord is bringing a charge against you who live in the land. There is no faithfulness. There's no love. There's no acknowledgement of God in the land. So again, God's presenting the charges against Israel here in verses 1 through 3. And here's the first of them. So Hosea is calling on the people, the Israelites, to listen to this message from God because God is going to charge them with a very serious crime. In a sense here, God is taking the Israelites to court. And the basic accusation here is that there's no faithfulness, right? There's no trustworthiness, there's no truth, there's no loyalty, there's no kindness, there's no love, and there's no evidence of knowledge of God in the land, acknowledgement of God in the land. These were all things that God had ordered the people to pursue when he established this covenant with the Israelites at Sinai in the time of Moses. And this loyalty, this love, where it says there's no faithfulness, which means there's no truth, there's no trustworthiness, and there's no love. Now, the way this is written in the Hebrew, the word is hesed in Hebrew. It's not like a human kind of love, generally speaking. It's a love to those who are inferior, and a love to those who are in need of help. It's a compassionate love. So God is saying there's no truth in your land. There's no compassion for those who are in need. Verse 2, there is only cursing, right? There's no truth. There's no love. There's no knowledge of me as God. All that exists is cursing, lying, murder, stealing, adultery. And they break all the bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. So instead of these virtues of faithfulness and hesed love, this compassionate love and acknowledgement of God, instead of all that, what God observes is this oath taking, which is cursing. It's misusing the Lord's name in an oath, right? The way the Hebrew is written here, it's some type of a curse made in the name of some deity in which one person is calling down calamity on another person. So instead of love, compassionate love, there's cursing, there's hoping in the name of a deity that something bad happens to someone else. There's lying, there's denial of truth, there's deception, there's murder, there's stealing, there's adultery, there's violence, there's bloodshed. And these sins are violations of half of the Ten Commandments. And so, and especially these violent crimes were so common that they seemed to follow one after the other without interruption. That's what bloodshed follows bloodshed means, just one violent crime after another. And the way that the Hebrew text is written here, it's very solemn and it's very vivid. It would be far more forceful if we read this as Hosea saying, the people swear, they lie, they kill, they steal. These are continual sins, and nothing else is taking place except these sins. All there is swearing and lying and killing and adultery and stealing and all these things. And so verse 3, because of this, the land dries up. Remember, a big theme throughout Hosea is fertility in the land. So because of all these sins, the land dries up. All who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, they're all swept away. So because of these horrible conditions, God was not going to bless Israel. Instead, he was going to curse the land. So much so that every part of the northern kingdom, Israel, was going to suffer. Everything, every living thing. And what seems to be in view here is a drought. That's the form of chastisement coming upon the people in view here is a severe drought. There's nothing. The land is laid waste. Now the view shifts towards the priests of the land. Verse 4. So in this next section of verses, God is going to speak through Hosea, again, like a judge at a trial, and he's going to address the priests as being representative of all the priests, as well as all the other Israelites are listening. So, verse 4, let no one bring a charge, let no one accuse another, for your people are like those who bring charges against a priest. So, Israel's guilt is so clear here that God is forbidding the people from denying his charge against them. You can't deny this. And remember, he is judge. So, as judge here, bringing these charges against the people, he's essentially silencing the court, order in the court, no outbursts from the court. And really the last part of this verse is hard to interpret, but what it most likely means is God is charging a priest, where it says who bring charges against a priest. Most likely that's the high priest, and God is charging him with dereliction of duty. Verse 5, you stumble day and night, and the prophets stumble with you, so I will destroy your mother. So because of this failure, the priests are going to have great difficulty. And as they walk through life, they're going to stumble, and the false prophets were going to err. And both types of these leaders, the priests and the false prophets, are standing guilty before God. God is bringing charge against them, and God is promising to destroy the mother of the Israelites, which is a reference to the nation Israel as a whole. Verse 6, my people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also reject you as my priests, because you have ignored the law of your God, and because you've done that, I will also ignore your children. So God's going to eliminate these leaders because of their lack of knowledge of himself. In other words, they failed to acknowledge God as God. And God was going to reject them as his priests on earth, whose job was to mediate the knowledge of God, not just to the people, but to the nations. That goes back to Exodus 19. So God's going to reject these priests because they rejected the knowledge that God gave them through his law. He's going to abandon them. He's going to forget them and their children because they had forgotten God and his law. That may seem unfair, especially to us, that the mothers of the priests, the children of the priests, that they would all be punished for the sins of the priests. That doesn't seem fair, but the concept of corporate guilt and punishment among the Israelites at this time in history, and we've seen it, is frequently reflected through their life. We see this all throughout the Old Testament. So to us it seems unfair, but this was the way corporate guilt was addressed. It was a punishment to you and your ancestors and your ancestors' ancestors. So that might be hard for us to grasp, but what we do understand is that one person's sins do have consequences that frequently affect other people. And that's really the point being made here. Verse 7, the more priests there were, the more they sinned against me. They exchanged their glorious God for something disgraceful. So God had blessed the Israelites by increasing their numbers. But their response to that blessing was to increase their sinning against him. And so consequently, he would change their glory. They exchanged their glorious God for something disgraceful. So this glory would be exchanged among this large population of people into shame. God would reduce now their numbers instead of increasing their numbers, and he would withdraw from them. Verse 8, they feed on the sins of my people, and they relish their wickedness. So the Israelite priests, they were feeding on the sin offerings that the people brought to these pagan shrines. And because these offerings were brought to these idols, it's as if these Israelite priests are feeding on the sins of the people themselves. So the people bring an offering, which is a sin offering, to a false idol. The priests allow it, which in a sense is them feeding on this sin of these people. And the priests, they desired these offerings. These were actual offerings brought before these gods. And so they encouraged the people to practice this idolatry even more, so that more sacrifices would come in so they could consume these. The more sacrifices that were brought, the more meat, the more food that the priests could eat. So this is in a literal sense as well. Verse 9, and it will be like people, like priests. I will punish both of them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. So God was going to therefore punish not just the unfaithful people, but the unfaithful priests of the people as well. Both of these groups were sinning. So God's promising to punish them all for their sinful ways and repay them for these idolatrous practices. The people would indulge in the sin. The priests, who were supposed to direct the people away from that, would allow it. In fact, they would feast off of it and encourage it all the more. So who God had appointed as the priests of the people was horribly failing at what they were tasked to do. So God was going to punish not just the people, but the priests for their sins. Verse 10, they will eat, these priests, but they will not have enough. They will engage in prostitution, but they will not flourish, because they have deserted the Lord to give themselves to prostitution. Old wine and new wine take away their understanding. So these priests would consume these sins of the people, but they wouldn't eat enough. They wouldn't get their fill, because God is going to send this scarcity of food as a punishment. And even though they behaved like these prostitutes, like these harlots, by committing fornication with these pagan temple prostitutes, their numbers weren't going to increase, because God was going to reduce their fertility. Remember, this book is all about fertility of the people, of the land. God's going to reduce that possibility of increasing their number, because they had stopped listening to him and had stopped obeying his law. And this practice of this spiritual idolatry, this harlotry, with its emphasis on drinking wine, had turned the hearts of the people from God. And along with their heart from God went any kind of realistic understanding of what was best for him, best for them, which God had already revealed to them. They are falling away in apostasy, and God is saying, I am separating me from you. Verse 12, my people consult wooden idols and a diviner's rod to speak to them. A spirit of prostitution leads them astray. They are unfaithful to their God. So God's people consulted these wooden idols that they had fashioned themselves. They sought revelations using magicians' wands, rods. Their spirit of harlotry led them away from the true God and God's word, and they were behaving like prostitutes. They had become unfaithful to their true husband, Yahweh. Verse 13, they sacrifice on the mountains. In other words, they worship these idols on tops of the hills, which to them, they were believing that they were closer to heaven by worshiping on the top of a mountaintop or a hill, worshiping these false deities. So they sacrifice on the mountaintops. They burn offerings on the hills, under oak, under poplar, under terebinth, and these are shade trees, right? So not only are they thinking that they're closer to heaven of these false gods by worshiping on top of the mountains, they offer these sacrifices under these large shade trees as a convenience. Therefore, your daughters turn to prostitution, and your daughters-in-law turn to adultery. So, because they worshipped at their convenience under these shade trees, it was as bad as the daughters of Israel practicing prostitution and adultery with these male cult prostitutes at the temple. That this was horrible adultery and idolatry taking place, spiritual adultery. Verse 14, I will not punish your daughters when they turn to prostitution, nor your daughters-in-law when they commit adultery. So even though in the previous verse we saw what the result of this fake worship was the daughters and the daughter-in-laws turning to this harlotry, because the men themselves consort with harlots and sacrifice with shrine prostitutes. A people without understanding will come to ruin. So when God says, I will not punish your daughters and I will not punish your daughter-in-laws, God was not going to punish just the females, is what this is saying, because the male prostitutes were just as guilty. The females were unfaithful to their husbands. The husbands were also, though, engaging in these immoral acts with these pagan temple male prostitutes. And so the people is marked by a lack of understanding of God's will, God's law, and now they're going to come to ruin when God punishes them and humbles them. Verse 15, and though you, Israel, commit adultery, do not let Judah become guilty. So God's warning the Israelites, don't pollute your fellow Israelites in the southern kingdom with your unfaithfulness. Don't do it. He's warning them. Don't pollute your brothers and sisters to the south. Don't go into the pagan temples and take an oath in God's name. This is hypocrisy and adultery and idolatry. And the Israelites are partaking in all this, and now God's going to punish them. Do not go to Gilgal. Gilgal was a pagan cultic site. Do not go to Beit Aven, and do not swear as surely as the Lord lives. So Beit Aven, it's a play on words. Hosea had previously mentioned coming to Bethel, the house of God, but this is sarcasm on that word. Bet Aven means house of wickedness, so it's Hebrew sarcasm. Don't go to Gilgal. Don't go to Bethel, which is now a house of wickedness. It had become one of the main centers of idolatry in Israel since the time of King Jeroboam I. Verse 16, the Israelites are stubborn, like a stubborn heifer. How then can the Lord pasture them like lambs in a meadow? So God is asking a rhetorical question here. If he can continue to guide Israel as its shepherd, since Israel, as the flock, was not behaving like a compliant heifer or a compliant lamb. They had become obstinate. They had become stubborn. So God is asking, can I continue to shepherd these people? And the answer was, of course, no. They are beyond that now. Verse 17, Ephraim is joined to idols, so leave him alone. Ephraim means fruitful, and it was the largest tribe in the northern kingdom at the time of the split of the north and south kingdom. So Ephraim, fruitful, the largest tribe. And because they were the largest, they often represented the nation Israel as a whole. And Ephraim had to abandon its shepherd for idols. And since they had done that, God is calling for other people to leave Ephraim alone. God would abandon Ephraim to the judgment that was going to come from pursuing this sin, because Ephraim had become incorrigible, but God is saying, just leave I will deal with them myself. Verse 18. Even when their drinks are gone, they continue their prostitution. Their rulers dearly love shameful ways. So even when the Israelites were not under the influence of alcohol, they still played the role of a harlot constantly. And the rulers of the people, the priests, who were supposed to act like shields to protect the people, were participating in the sins of the people. They actually even loving these sins, and it was bringing shame on the entire nation. Verse 19. A whirlwind will sweep them away, and their sacrifices will bring them shame. So God's going to blow away Israel in his judgment. It's as if the wind was going to wrap the nation Israel in its wings and carry it away. And when judgment finally comes upon the people, then the Israelites are going to feel shame for participating in this sacrificing to false gods and idolatry and spiritual adultery and all these things. And that's chapter 4. So let's go through chapter 5 here, because we're making good time here tonight. And these two chapters really tie together. So verse 5, 1 and 2. Hear this, you priests. Pay attention, you Israelites. Listen, royal house. This judgment is against you. You have been a snare at Mitzpah. You have been a net spread out on Tabor. So Hosea is calling on the priests of Israel and the whole population of Israel and the royal household of Israel to hear this message from God. That's, hear this, you priests. Listen, you Israelites, you people, you common people and royal house. Listen to this. And you know, the royal house, it's hard to identify who the king was at this time. Possibly Zechariah, but we don't know for sure. But this following word of judgment of God is going to apply to everybody, because they had been like a trap to all the people within the northern kingdom. Their policies, their practices that trapped many people into this idolatry, leading to this consequent bondage and destruction. Leadership was corrupting everybody, everywhere. Verse 2. The rebels are knee-deep in slaughter. I will discipline all of them. So those who had revolted against God's covenant had now gone into deep depravity. It's as though they were wading through carnage, right? Knee-deep in slaughter. And this is a continuation of the hunting imagery that we've seen before, especially in verse 1. You've been a snare and a net spread out. Well, let's go back here for a second. God, you know, this is a book of judgment, and it's a book of punishment. And God here is promising. He's making this promise through Hosea. He's going to punish them all, but he's not going to eliminate them. And see, I think we need to keep hold of this, because all throughout these books, Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel, and you know, there is punishment upon the people, just as we punish our children for the things that they do that are wrong. But there's always an opportunity for restoration. So God here is going to punish them. But why? So that they will return to him. And we're going to see that here in a bit. So verse 3. I know all about Ephraim. Remember, God said, leave Ephraim to me. Israel is not hidden from me. Ephraim, you have now turned to prostitution, and Israel is corrupt. God knew Israel intimately. God had not been deceived into falling into a trap as the Israelites had. Ephraim was playing the harlot against her husband, God, and had defiled herself in that very act. Ephraim was the largest tribe again in Israel. And so Hosea frequently uses Ephraim as a synonym for the entire northern kingdom, Israel. But here the reference is to the tribe Ephraim and the priests of Ephraim, which again, it was their responsibility to distinguish between the clean and the unclean. That goes back to Leviticus 10:10. But they have failed to do that. They had not done their job, and now Israel had defiled itself. Verse 4. Their deeds do not permit them to return to their God. A spirit of prostitution is in their heart. They do not acknowledge the Lord. So these cultic practices that these Israelite idolaters had fallen into had prevented them from wholeheartedly repenting and returning back to God. The spirit of the harlot had overtaken them, and they had become addicted to this idolatry. And because of that, again, at the end of verse 4, they do not acknowledge the Lord, meaning they don't know God any longer. Verse 5, and Israel's arrogance testifies against them. The Israelites, even Ephraim, stumble in their sin. Judah also stumbles with them. So remember, God had told the Israelites, don't go in and pollute Judah. But here we see Judah is stumbling in some of these areas as well. But this arrogance, this self-exaltation of the northern kingdom, the Israelites, caused them to stumble as they were pursuing this sin, this iniquity. Their noses were up in the air in pride. And because of that, as they walked, seeking out more sin, they would stumble. They would stagger around. Verse 6. And when they go with their flocks and their herds to seek the Lord, they will not find him, because he has withdrawn himself from them. So they might go seeking God, even with their proud noses up in the air. They may turn to bringing their animals in sacrifice to the Lord, but they're not going to find him. Remember in Jeremiah 29, God says, you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. Here, they may be seeking God, but it's not with all their heart. They're not going to find him. God has withdrawn from them. And whereas holiness makes fellowship with God possible, sin and iniquity and hypocrisy, it rules all that out. God's withdrawing his help and his blessing from the people because of their attitude. Verse 7. They are unfaithful to the Lord. They give birth to illegitimate children, and when they celebrate their new moon feasts, he will devour their fields. So the Israelites had dealt treacherously with God by being unfaithful to their covenant responsibilities with him. They were like an unfaithful wife who had had an affair, become pregnant from another man, given birth to illegitimate children, and that's all just the natural result of unfaithfulness. Unfaithfulness in marriage. Here it was unfaithfulness in covenant, marriage to the Lord. They were his bride. Verse 8. Sound the trumpet in Gibeah, the horn in Ramah. Raise the battle cry in Bet Aven. We see that again. Lead on Benjamin. So these sound of trumpet in Gibeah and the horn in Ramah. The blowing of a trumpet would announce the coming in a city of an invader. All throughout Israel's towns, there were sentries posted who would blow these horns as alarms when the enemy was, when an invader was coming. That includes Gibeah and Ramah in northern Judah, and Bet Aven, Bethel. We saw that in chapter 4, verse 15. The house of God had become the house of iniquity. And so there were sentries at these cities. And all throughout these territories included Benjamin. Benjamin was the home to all of these towns in one way or another. And in all these cities, the news of an invader was going to come. And so rather than leading Ephraim into battle, as the tribe of Benjamin did in the day of Deborah, going back to Judges chapter 5. Instead of that, an invader is going to come and is going to pursue Benjamin and Ephraim. This verse describes an invasion of the territory of Benjamin from the south. The enemy is portrayed as advancing along the main mountain road that runs through Bethel into the heart of Ephraim. Gibeah was only a few miles from Jerusalem. That was the first to be attacked. Then Ramah, which was 5 miles away, that was attacked. And then Bethel or Bet-Aven, that was about 11 miles away. That was attacked. All within the northern territory border of Benjamin. This enemy was going to come, which later on would prove to be the Assyrians. Verse 9. Ephraim will be laid waste on the day of reckoning among the tribes of Israel. I proclaim what is certain. So when God rebukes Ephraim for their sins, it was going to become a desolate wasteland all throughout all of its tribal territories. And where God says, I proclaim what is certain, this is a promise. This is going to happen. Verse 10. Judah's leaders are like those who move boundary stones. And we're going to talk about this because this is important. And I will pour out my wrath on them like a flood of water. So the leaders of Judah, seeing all that's happening to their northern neighbor, the Israelites, who are also their brothers and sisters, right? They're all Israelites, but they're in two different nations. Judah sees all this. You'd think that they would learn, but they too break covenant with God. In the way that they were like those who move boundary stones, boundary markers. What that means, Judah had annexed Benjamite territory, which violated the terms of the Mosaic covenant regarding tribal allotments, going back to the book of Deuteronomy. God established the borders of the tribes of Israel. Here, Judah is annexing part of the tribe of Benjamin. They are moving the stone, right? They are moving the boundary stone. And because of that, God's wrath is going to rain down on the Judites. Now, moving the boundary marker of a field, that's the equivalent of stealing property. And that would be like today where you have a fence line between you and your neighbor's house, and you go out and you move the fence line so that now part of your neighbor's property is within your fence line. It's stealing property. That was a severe violation of the law, going back to Deuteronomy 19 and 27. But this was more than just a physical boundary being moved. It also included the spiritual, because they had moved the boundary between what is right and what is wrong, between what is true and what is false, between the true gods and the idols. By moving the boundary into Benjamin, the people of Judah were moving the spiritual boundary line into this false area. And they are taking it on. And because of that, God's going to punish them. Verse 11. Ephraim is oppressed, trampled in judgment, intent on pursuing idols. So Ephraim was going to experience this crushing judgment by an enemy invader, the Assyrians, because they determined to follow these false idols rather than obey the God, or obey God, the Lord. Ephraim was determined to rely on Assyria, but they would in fact fall to the Assyrians. Verse 12, I am like a moth to Ephraim, like rot to the people of Judah. So God was going to consume the northern kingdom slowly, like a moth. Like a moth destroys clothing or cloth, or like rot comes in and causes wood to decay or flesh to decay. It would be a slow consumption that God is going to come in and allow this. This is going to come through an enemy invasion, the invasion of the Assyrian army. Verse 13, when Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah saw his sores, then he, Ephraim, turned to Assyria and sent to the great king for help, because that's what they did. They, instead of trusting God, they turned to all these neighboring nations for help. But he, the Assyrian king, is not able to cure you, nor is he able to heal your sores. So both Israel and Judah had appealed to the king of Assyria for help in this time. But of course, he's unable to save them. In Judah, King Ahaz did this. That's 2 Kings 16. In Israel, King Menahem did this. That's 2 Kings 15. Rather than trusting in the Lord, they were trusting in these neighboring nations. They appealed to the Assyrians for help. What ends up happening, though, is instead of helping them, the Assyrians invade them. Verse 14, for I will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a great lion to Judah, and I will tear them to pieces and then go away. I will carry them off with no one to help them, rescue them. It was not just the Assyrians invading, it was God allowing the Assyrians to invade. God was ultimately responsible for the discipline of these two kingdoms. And like a lion, he would tear them to pieces and carry them away in judgment, which we've seen in these books so far. That happened. To the northern kingdom, it was the Assyrians. To the southern kingdom, it was the Babylonians. And there was going to be no one who could deliver them. Israel fell to the Assyrians in 722 BC. For the third invasion, they were invaded first in 743 and then 734. And then finally in 722, they fell to the Assyrians and were taken into exile. Judah escaped that. Because of King Hezekiah's trust in the Lord. So they escaped Assyrian dominance, but eventually they too would fall. This prophecy would be fulfilled in 586 BC when Judah fell to the Babylonians. Verse 15, and then I will return to my lair until they have borne their guilt and seek my face. In their misery, they will earnestly seek me. So like a lion returning to its lair, God would go away and leave his people until they bore the punishment for their sins and then sought forgiveness from him. And when they felt their affliction finally, which would be a conviction through God's Spirit, then they would seek him. They would seek him earnestly with their heart, and then they would find him. Jeremiah 29. And the last statement of this verse, in their misery they will earnestly seek me. It provides a transition from the messages of judgment in chapters 4 and 5 to the promises of restoration in chapter 6, which we will look at tomorrow. So that is Hosea chapters 4 and 5, and I pray that that has been a help to you. And again, I appreciate you being here, being a part of this study. I really hope this is a help, and I am thankful that you take time out to go through this study together. We are learning together, and there are so many people from across the country in different states taking part in this study. So there's a lot of weather-related things coming up this week here in Nebraska. We have really strong winds here today. Thankfully, we didn't lose power in the studio. I know for many of our friends in Ohio and in the South, snow is coming, ice, sleet. We're going to pray for safety and all that it's minimal, but I do appreciate you being here tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care. God bless. Bye-bye.